investigative filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, UFOs, A Clockwork Orange. Welcome back. Jeremy Corbell is an investigative filmmaker based in Southern California. He's been my guest on this program a number of times. He has explored the worlds of nanotechnology, aerospace, exotic propulsion, and an in-depth examination of the life and discoveries and theories of what he calls the godfather of conspiracy, John Lear, which is sort of how he met me. Lear led him to the Bob Lazar story, of course, and that led him to me. And we've talked about a number of Jeremy's projects, films that he's made about off-world alien implants, insights into NASA, UFO landing sites. He's developed a number of investigative sources in the dark world who've shared things with him about what the truth is behind the UFO reality. And his speech at the Contact in the Desert event that I mentioned before, UFOs, A Clockwork Orange, suggests the UFO phenomena itself is a display, some sort of a controlled display by a mechanical or artificial intelligence. And we're going to ask him about that. Jeremy, welcome back to the program.
Hey, George. Thanks for having me on again. It's been a wild ride today, man.
Well, look, start with this. Was it fun? Was it a cool event?
It was so fun. That's the thing about these events. When people come to that, together in the middle of the desert like this, I mean, they're in the middle of the Mojave, under the stars. They're going to have so much fun. It was just incredible to see, and I feel encouraged by the hunger that I saw for information. People are so nice, and they were so curious, and there was a serious hunger for information, and that is so powerful. That's a weaponized curiosity, as I like to say.
You were there last year. Do you have a sense of whether it was big, as big, or bigger?
Yeah, it's definitely growing, and it's evolving, and that's the thing. As people start to learn about this event and they kind of experience the environment that this event is in, it's just going to keep growing. They say it's the Woodstock of UFOs, and, if the Beatles were here, they'd be playing there, but it's amazing.
So give me a sense of, I've been to UFO conferences, not for a while, but the ones I've been to here and there, some of them, it's an older audience, you see some of the same people again and again. Is there a younger crowd there, or are they attracting new generations of people who are curious about this?
Absolutely. That's what was kind of really inspiring about this. For many years, people are saying to me, you're the younger generation. Well, I'll tell you, that's no longer true. At Contact, there were people of all ages. Of course, we have the, hardcore UFO enthusiasts who have been looking into this subject for decades, and they are represented. But the most interesting conversations I had are with people who are just starting to learn cases, that are the bread and butter for us. I mean, it's things that along the way we've heard about, but people are just learning about this stuff. So absolutely, young generation is now infiltrating this, community and search for the truth, and that is so inspiring.
We kind of forget that, because of the internet, people are discovering the topic, and people have written about it all over again, or for the first time. Names that we would take for granted that are, people have been at this for a long time are completely new to these folks.
Right, and it's incredible to see the responses, because if they have no preconceived notion of this, kind of weird celebrity UFO worship that you end up seeing, right? They have no preconceived notion. They come in and they listen. And to hear their responses and to really gauge that and to see how people are being affected by the information. Are they asking critical questions? Are they asking for proof? And that was kind of the big thing. It was so cool. It was a really amazing event. I'm happy to have participated. I would participate again. It's an incredible crowd of people, but there are issues with these things. There always are.
We'll get into those. I want to do the positive part of it first. You got to, not only did you make a presentation, you got to introduce two people. You got to make two introductions. And if I could I haven't seen the whole list of speakers, but I would imagine if I could look at the list of speakers and pick the two that I would want to introduce, these would be the two. Who are they?
I'm a really lucky guy. So I got to introduce Linda Moulton Howe, who, is a trailblazer and a pioneer of this field. I first saw her work through film. She made that documentary series, A Strange Harvest, about cattle mutilations. And, from then I got to know Linda and her research. And so I was really excited to be able to introduce her and what she was talking about this weekend. And the other person was Jacques Vallée, who's a name that everybody should know. And it seemed like everybody knew Jacques Vallée from his, the response to his lecture. So that was a huge honor because I do follow Jacques' work, and I'd like to say he's a colleague now through all the interactions. But unbelievable, just great lectures. I was really fortunate to be able to introduce them.
All right, give me the synopsis. What did Jacques talk about? What was his presentation?
Wow, that really threw me for a loop. It was unbelievable. So what he ended up doing was he said from the beginning, I'm here for selfish reasons. I want to get material from you. He focused his entire talk on the material composition of UFOs and the study, the scientific analysis, the isotopic and elemental analysis of known UFO crash sites. So he had about 15 cases. He laid out the elements, laid out the isotopes, and essentially told us his theories and why. And he's looking for more evidence. So he's trying to move that scientific meter forward in the UFO field right now on these specific issues of elemental and isotopic analysis of alleged crashed UFOs.
There was a period when Jacques Vallée did not attend UFO events. He sort of gave up on it. And for a few years, he didn't want anything to do with it. I think he got kind of disgusted with some of the directions that were being taken. And I think he felt, what's the point of beating my head against the wall on this? What's changed with him? I know you got to spend some other time with him outside of the conference.
We did, and that was a really cool day today. And I asked him that exact question. And he actually left the country at some point. He was so disgusted by it. The misinformation, the disinformation, everybody trying to prove their own agenda, their own ideas, when as a scientist, and specifically as an information scientist, he was interested in just the data. So yeah, he was disenchanted, and it wasn't a few years. I mean, he didn't talk for decades, from what I understand, from what he told me. He really moved away from it because it wasn't furthering the research. So what did change? That was my question to him in the introduction that I did for him. And he came right out and said it, and said, the way that we're going to move this forward is to get physical evidence and physical proof. As a scientist, I need to be able to take a piece home or take a piece to the laboratory with me. You can come with me if it's your piece and analyze it and try to understand the material composition of these pieces and why they're so anomalous. And he's done so. He's done that. So I think that's why he was there.
Wait, he has samples that he has analyzed or has had analyzed for him of what? What is it?
Absolutely. We were comparing notes today from a case that I'm working on. He has a number, 15, that he told us about during his lecture, 15 different samples from some very famous UFO cases where the UFO would come in and just basically blow up, and they were able to collect samples over a long period of time because there was such a mass amount of it to really isolated specific events that only Jacques Vallée knew about because people went to him with the information. So he is currently studying, I believe it is 15 different samples of alleged alien craft. And
does he have results?
He does have results. And wow, it's amazing. Not only are they isotopically completely outside of the terrestrial norm, but he went a step further. And this is some really geeky stuff, but he went further. And he was saying that not only are these outside the terrestrial norm, but some of them are so pure in their form of, for example, magnesium, that he actually calculated how much money it would take to create that piece through the modern technology that we have now, and it was in the trillions of dollars. So his kind of ending understanding of it was essentially that this material is fabricated. It is fabricated scientifically with processes that we do not have the capability to do. It was made. It was made by an intelligence. That was incredible to hear.
I'm amazed. I'm amazed that he's taken the plunge on this. I mean, I've expressed my admiration and respect for him on this program many times. I think he's the most, important thinker and writer on this topic ever. For him to go this far it's almost uncharacteristic to be that open about him thinking that these samples are from somewhere else.
It really threw me off too.
He's like he needs to be bold or something, because normally he'd be very reserved about that kind of thing. He'd withhold a final judgment on the samples like that.
Yeah, and there's no final judgment yet, or maybe there is. I mean, he was talking very boldly about it. I mean, he has the analysis, and he has the ability to study more samples. But I definitely did not expect that. He's always been a little bit of a whisper. He would talk about strong things in a gentle way, and I respect that about him. And he did have that tone. But I think what it is if you're actually going to make a difference and move the needle forward, we need to get specific and we need to be very precise. And that is what he's done, is he's put together the ability to analyze materials that are alleged not from this world and see if we can get a definitive scientific answer to what we're dealing with these samples. It's like the alien implant issue. It only makes a difference if you can get hardcore physical evidence and science to back up what it is that you have. So I was really impressed with what he talked about.
Did he give a hint about analysis by whom? I mean, this kind of analysis is expensive. I can't imagine that he's doing it on his own. Is he working with someone?
He is, and I think he talked about that in the lecture. And essentially, he's put together let's just say he put together the opportunity to analyze these on the weekend. So he's got people, scientists, he said, are really open-minded. He says, if there is something that they can interrogate and look for evidence in, even if they know it's something out there, they're willing to do it. So that was kind of his message. And I think that he has put this together, and I think it's bold and it's strong, and I think he's going to have a lot of material sent to him, which is what he wants. And then I think that we're going to get some results. And I think that's an important thing that he's doing right now, and it's really inspiring.
So he showed up because he is soliciting people to send him stuff.
That's my read on it, but at the same time, he said it. Because I set that up in the intro. I said, why are you talking again? Why are you here? What do we need to hear from you? I'm curious, Jock, why are you here? And
all right.
He put it out there.
All right, we'll take a break. Welcome back. Jeremy Corbell, one other question about Jacques Vallée. So he's jumped back in with both feet, is very active, which is a good thing. He's asking for evidence to analyze. It seems like he's maybe working with somebody, a team of some sort that is looking for physical evidence. That's good. I mean, that would be enough to convince colleagues who might otherwise not be willing to take this topic on. I'm curious whether young people who were there know who Jacques Vallée is.
Yeah, well, he actually he did mention he was working with Hal Puthoff. He said that in his public lecture, which is interesting because that goes way back to the days of SRI, Stanford Research Institute. So I don't know exactly who he has on his team, but he is doing this analysis. As far as younger people and youth coming out to see him, oh yeah, they knew who he was. I mean, he's kind of the rock star of contact in the desert. You can't miss him. I mean, a tall guy with the silver hair and he's French. I mean, you cannot miss the guy. And definitely, younger people knew about him. They came with copies of his books that I don't even have. So he's out there. His message has been heard, but now we're getting something new, and that's what's really interesting.
What else? Anything else new that jumps out at you that is in the positive category?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was all positive. I mean, I'm going to talk other stuff, I'm sure, but essentially the whole event was just so cool because people really are hungry, and they're more educated than we ever were, 10, 20 years ago because they have more data, more information, and their ability to get that information. Even though there's a big signal-to-noise problem, if they want, they can get that information. So I feel like kind of hopeful tonight for the field of ufology, actually.
Well, I mean, you sat next to Vallée during some of the presentations that which you told me about it in a phone conversation we had, and he kind of had to shake his head here and there. There are some names, I'm not going to bash anybody now, but there are names that are very well known that promote themselves very much using social media and various other means, names that I would think would be more on the tips of the tongues of young people because they're out there. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts from Vallée on that?
Yeah, I mean, you could see it on his face, what his thoughts were on that. But, look, essentially, I'm making a joke. I said this at my presentation. Noise is the new black. And that's the problem. That's what's happening right now, is people are making these incredible claims. And it's as if they just say it enough times that it's going to be true. but it doesn't end up being true. I briefed the Pentagon, I briefed the Chief of Staff, I briefed the Department of Defense and former and current heads of the CIA. No matter how many times you say that, that's not the way it works, and they don't need your briefing. And I think that's kind of the reaction that I mentioned to you that I saw in Jacques, because I was having the same reaction, just, put my head in my hand. Really? Is this really what's amplified at these events? But look, Jacques made a good point. He said it's a free country, and it tastes better, to eat stuff that's not true. And so essentially that noise that we're hearing, those individuals that promote these phantasmagorical stories without evidence, without proof, and in fact they have the opposite of proof. That when they do that, all it does at first, it baits people and it'll get them interested in this topic. And I think that is powerful, though, because people can tell really quickly when it starts to turn south, and they start to see that it's more about the glorification of the individual rather than the information, and then they are still interested and they want answers, and that's when they're going to find out the real stuff.
Well, I hope that's
totally
true.
Bad. Yeah,
I hope that's true. So you're this one of the themes that you explore is noise, the noise in the field.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a huge problem. I mean, Jacques has talked about that, the different layers of deception.
Let's get into your presentation then, this Clockwork Orange thing, because it sort of is part of that theme as well. What do you mean?
Okay, just really simply, it's a metaphor from an Anthony Burgess book and the Stanley Kubrick film called The Clockwork Orange, which I hope everybody has seen. It's an incredible film and a great book. And, the basic hypothesis of that theory, if you look at the movie and just kind of compare it to that idea, is a mechanistic or even, I'd say, like robotic characteristics of a phenomenon that's presenting itself to us in the form of things like UFOs. So I'm exploring this concept that UFOs, the whole idea is that it's bigger than just, what you see with your eyes. That possibly there's an interactive artificial intelligence that's manipulating the desires of humanity. And this is not just something I'm coming up with. This is actually shown in a lot of the cases, the way that the phenomenon displays itself in the forms of UFOs to humans and their reactions. It has precognition, and it has a hyperintelligence, and it seems to be in command of this UFO display. So that's the concept of UFOs as a clockwork orange, is that there is a facade, that inside of this thing that looks organic and it looks like it has juice, that in fact it's mechanistic.
The idea of it being a display, which I have heard a couple of times in specific contexts, Skinwalker Ranch, for example, and we'll come back to that later, but the idea that a lot of what we see in the UFO field is a display, a performance, a demonstration, almost like sometimes a distraction, a shiny bauble to show to a magpie or something. Is that sort of where you're going?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately coming to that conclusion. I mean, I started off as a real, nuts and bolts looking into the UFO phenomenon. I was a jiu-jitsu athlete. It was very simple. When you had to go against an opponent that was bigger than you, you had to have better technique. So that's what I focused on, and that translated over into my investigation of UFOs. And oddly enough, as I go deeper into this, I mean, as you know, because I've asked you questions, essentially, as I go deeper into this, it becomes obvious and it becomes apparent that these seemingly illogical moments that people are having, the way that these technologies or the phenomenon itself toys with our technologies, it mocks them. It'll fly circles around our fastest planes. It shows us what it wants us to see, just enough so it lures us in, and it shows signs of being mechanistic.
Well, I've seen. I'll just share with the audience that I've seen papers that have been written by some pretty advanced thinkers in this area, privately circulated, not for public dissemination, where they have analyzed data and come to the conclusion that whatever intelligence is intruding into our reality is likely AI, using robotic or artificial mechanical means to handle physical things. And is that sort of where you're going?
Well, that is where the evidence is leading. I'm not making a conclusion. I'm proposing an idea based upon what I've seen. I'd like to say, look, these are craft coming from the Pleiades, or these are craft coming from, another star system. But that is not the evidence that I've been given. So over time, as I look at this, the field gets stranger and stranger. And I'm like the last person saying it. A lot of people have said this. I'm just catching up.
Yeah, John Keel wrote something along those lines. Jacques Vallée has given it his own interpretation over the years, looking at particular incidents that seem, on the face, preposterous. And they're almost made to look preposterous on purpose, to challenge sort of the outside limits of our believability, our credibility.
Yeah, and in fact, we kind of, Jacques and I had a little bit of time today to spend together, and we actually talked about that. And we talked about, the original theory that came out that was, essentially that human beings are livestock, that what's going on is almost like we're property or cattle. And that was proposed a long time ago. And I just wanted to see what Jacques would say about that. And he actually agreed. And that blew me away, that maybe what's going on is much deeper. It's much deeper than lights in the sky, obviously. But that is a scary thought. I mean, that's, even Lear was talking about that a while ago.
Well, I mean, that goes back to Charles Fort,
right.
the originator of the whole term Fortean, talking about us being property, that somebody owns the earth. And a lot of people have expanded on that, Keel and Vallée among them. It's a very disturbing thing. And if you were looking for a reason to have a cover-up, or a reason why somebody doesn't open up the hangar doors and show us the craft, or open up the file drawers and show us the secrets, maybe that's it, because I think people would have a hard time dealing with the idea that we're property, or that we're livestock, or we're farmed or harvested in some way.
Yeah, it's an absolutely repulsive idea, I think, to the human mind. But, look, ultimately, whatever this phenomenon is, if it was aggressive, if it was, malevolent, we wouldn't even be here. And so this is kind of the thing, is that these displays that we see, and that is something I can say Jacques also said today, was that, these displays seem to come in a pattern that is indicative of education, that there is something to be learned simply by looking by the pattern. That it is reinforcing constantly ideas into society and into the, kind of human consciousness. And I think that's fascinating.
I think at least many of the cases that I've dealt with, if it is some sort of an AI or some omnipotent, I guess it's not omnipotent, that it can be fooled, that it can be circumvented, it doesn't know everything, that there is at least hope that you can study it, figure it out, and survive. Obviously, as you mentioned, if it intended to wipe us out, it could certainly do that. It's demonstrated mastery of the skies and technology, things of that sort. You would think it would be tough to discern what's real and what isn't, and what its motives are.
It's a really gray area, and this is where you get a lot of the noise. Because what happens is people have a profound, true experience, but they want to assign belief to it. And so they seek out all evidence to prove that belief that they have is the truth. And that's where we get into muddy waters. Because whatever's going on, we really need to be able to be objective and look at it. And this is the really gray area. It's like studying the human brain. How do you do it with the human brain? I mean, we are so immersed in the phenomenon. It is so much more prevalent around us than people think. There are so many more UFO sightings than people imagine. Just talk to your neighbor. Talk to your family. Just ask the question. More people have had experiences than you can possibly understand. I have a guest this weekend, a friend who's a helicopter pilot in the military, and he's staying with me. And he was saying that within the military, he didn't run into a lot of people that were interested in this stuff. And I asked him, well, how many people do you really ask? And that was the truth, because in that capacity that you're working, that's not the first topic of conversation. Usually it's staying alive in a helicopter, right? So my, challenge to the audience here tonight, everybody that's listening, okay, is that, you ask people, ask the question, have you had an experience that you can't explain? Have you had an experience that you can account for with a version of reality that you understand? And you will be amazed how many people have been affected by the UFO, but by the phenomenon itself, all things paranormal.
You know, it drives you crazy thinking, why do some people see it and others don't? Some of the explanation is people don't look. You know, they're looking at their phones, they're driving, they're not looking at the skies, or they're not paying attention. And even if they see something, it doesn't process or whatever. A lot of people just don't look at all. Then it gets down to, if it is a display, why some people are allowed to see it and others are not. Does it want us to learn? Is it messing with us for a reason, and something that's not sinister or deadly to humanity, but some reason like showing us that a whole bunch of stuff, as at Skinwalker Ranch, is connected, that UFOs, poltergeist, Bigfoot, parallel dimensions, creatures, whatever, are all connected in some level.
Yeah, I asked Jacques this question today, actually, is, do you see this phenomenon as homogeneous throughout the world, throughout time? I mean, we're talking, he's been, studying this for 60 plus years. Is it throughout time and throughout the world homogeneous and cross-cultural? And does belief or does desire to see something help you see something or help you experience something, or have you experienced something? And he said no. It appears to be homogeneous. It appears to be the same throughout time, throughout culture, throughout the earth, that this phenomenon is consistently engaging humanity in the forms of UFOs and beyond, but that the desire to see it does not necessarily, other than false sightings, does not necessarily help you to see it, that it almost chooses at random people you would never imagine, people that they would never imagine, end up engaging a full-on flying saucer landing.
Jacques has written for a lot of years about a control system that he thinks whatever this intelligence is, it uses a control system to sort of manipulate us, mess with us. Does he explain that further? Do you have a better understanding of what he's talking about?
I mean, again, I hate talking like this, but yeah, I asked him about that today. Like, that was a part of a personal conversation, and I straight up asked him, what do you mean by the control system? I mean, do you mean an educational system? He did not talk about that at his lectures, but, I think that is still firmly, that was conveyed, that was still firmly his understanding at this current time, that the control system is some sort of educational system to some end that we don't understand.
He's still, from the beginning, when he was back even working with Hynek and before that, and then in Blue Book and ever since, it's always been a matter of data, collecting cases, collecting more information. He's always believed it's a solvable mystery. Is that sort of your take on it as well, that with enough information we can figure it out?
I've never been one to be obsessed with, the solving it completely, because I don't even know what that means. That means you think you know the parameters of the problem that you're in. What I want to do is move the needle forward. My films, I focus on facts, I focus on science, I focus on, also the human characters and what they've gone through. But I really try to take a critical approach, and the reason for that is I want to move the needle forward. I don't know where we're going to end. I don't have that answer. And it's the people that pretend they have that answers, that's the noise. They don't have the answers.
Back to Clockwork Orange for a second. We'll go to a break here in about a minute. The idea of reading the book and incorporating that into your presentation, I remember the movie, let alone the book. The book was really tough because of the language, the weird language that you have to absorb. Is that part of your presentation?
No, I wish I would have talked in that dialect. That would have been over everybody's head. That's crazy out there. But essentially, I think what really inspired me, and you have this protagonist in the book who's going through this experience where even though they have violence and all of these problems, they don't want to be turned into a Clockwork Orange. They want to be a human being with their own will. And so, that's kind of where the metaphor came from. It's a deep book. It's a powerful book. But essentially, the idea of having control over one's life, and not feeling out of control. But, that's the baseline theory, is that what we're looking at is absolutely, the evidence is showing that there's some sort of intelligence that probably is artificial in some way, because it does make mistakes, and it is manipulating the desire of humanity. For sure, it's doing that.
All right, you got a number of films that you have developed and that you have available, and we're going to talk in particular about Patient 17. It sort of flows from Jacques Vallée's discussion of looking for physical evidence, because you had some. You got some as part of that film project. When we come back, we'll talk about Patient 17, and then also we need some help from the audience regarding a dramatic case involving several hundred military personnel. It hasn't been publicized, but we're going to hear about it in just a moment, talking with investigative filmmaker Jeremy Corbell.